Welcome back to Chat PLT with me, Pastor Luke Taylor. This is a chance for us to explore questions that we have as Christians. Questions you can ask me and I'll do my best to answer them honestly and to look at some of the tensions that are within them. So what is today's question? Well, let me first ask one to you. Be honest, have you ever wanted to get someone back? Not in a huge dramatic way, but just enough to feel like things are even again. Someone talks about you behind your back, or someone undermines you at work. Someone sends that message and you know exactly how to reply to win that conversation. Even driving, someone cuts you up and suddenly you're not just driving anymore, you're on a mission, you're at war. There's something in us that doesn't just want justice, it wants payback. And if we're honest, we don't just want things to be fair, we want to come out on top. Today's question is one that comes up a lot, and it's a great one. Does the Bible condone revenge with an eye for an eye? And doesn't Jesus contradict it when he says turn the other cheek? And it's a great question. And the short answer is no, the Bible does not contradict itself here. But to understand why, we need to go back to where this law came from and what it was actually doing. Here's something about human nature that hasn't changed in thousands of years. When someone hurts us, we don't just want to get even, we want to get one up. You scratch my car, I'll trash yours. You insult me in front of my friends, I'll humiliate you in front of yours. You hurt one of mine, I'll destroy 10 of yours. That's not just human nature, that is, it's the WhatsApp argument that gets out of hand. It's the family fallout that nobody can even remember how it began. You know, my father, he was a man who always held a grudge. I'll hate him for that. You know, that kind of attitude. That's every feud that has ever spiraled past the point of no return. Human nature is like this. The problem is escalation. It gets out of hand. It makes me think of that scene in The Untouchables where Sean Connery's cop is advising Elliot Ness. They pull a knife, you pull a gun. He sends one of yours to the hospital, you send one of his to the morgue. And the Bible gives us a perfect example of where that road leads if we look at the life of Samson. Samson is basically a one-man revenge spiral. The Philistines hurt his wife, he slaughters them. They come after him, he kills 1,000 of them with a jawbone. It never ends. And it can't end because revenge logic has no natural stopping point. Every act of retaliation becomes the other side's justification for the next one. I wonder, does that sound familiar? So let's have a quick look at what the law was actually doing. So in that world, that very human, very destructive cycle, God gives Israel a law. Exodus 21:24. Eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. And we read that and think, whew, that's brutal. That's harsh, that's violent. But that's because we're reading it wrong. First thing to notice, this is a legal ruling. It appears in Exodus, Leviticus and Deuteronomy, always in the context of judges, disputes and formal cases. This was never meant to be a license for personal revenge. It was a principle for the courts. You don't take matters into your own hands. Justice is handled properly, carefully and proportionally. Second thing, in the ancient world, this was revolutionary. There was something called the Code of Hammurabi, one of the oldest legal codes that we have, and that handed out punishments based on your social class. A nobleman who injured a commoner got a fine. A commoner who injured a nobleman lost a limb. Justice wasn't equal. It depended on who you were. But Israel's law said, no, the punishment should fit the crime, not the person. An eye for an eye. Not 2 eyes, not your whole family, not your livestock and your livelihood, something that would often be the case in the ancient world. This was proportional, equal, and limited. The law wasn't condoning violence, it was limiting it. And that is genuinely radical for its time. But it was never the ideal. See, here's the thing, proportional justice was a massive step forward, but it was never meant to be the final word. Gandhi is credited with saying an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. And he's kind of right. Even perfect, proportional, equal justice still leaves everybody damaged. Somebody still lost an eye. Well, two people. The law restrains the worst of human nature, but Jesus comes to show us something better than restraint. So let's look at what Jesus is actually saying. Matthew 5, verses 38 to 39. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. Now, before you think Jesus is telling you to be a doormat, let's understand what's happening here. In that culture, a slap on the right cheek was a backhanded slap. And a backhanded slap wasn't just violence, it was an insult. It was someone asserting dominance over you, putting you in your place. It's a power move. And Jesus says, turn the other cheek. He's not saying take the abuse and say nothing. He's saying refuse to play the game on their terms. Don't let their aggression dictate your response. You have a different kind of power here, and it's greater than theirs. See, Jesus isn't contradicting the law, he's transcending it. The law said limit your retaliation. Jesus says, hey, what if you didn't retaliate at all? What if instead your move was love? So here's my position on this. The eye for an eye principle was a genuine act of God's grace toward a world drowning in cycles of revenge. It introduced proportionality, equality before the law, and restraint in a brutal, ancient world. It was revolutionary. And as a principle of justice, it still matters. Courts should be proportional. Consequences should fit actions. But Jesus calls us personally, individually, in our relationships to a higher way. Not a law, but a way of love. That doesn't mean there's no place for justice. Romans 13 makes it clear that God works through governing authorities to uphold justice in society. You can pursue justice. You can involve the police. You can seek what's right through the proper channels. But personally, in your heart, Jesus said, don't let revenge be your engine. Because revenge never ends. It always just escalates. The person who wronged you, the colleague, the family member, the friend who betrayed you. The question Jesus puts to us isn't what do they deserve, it's what does love look like here? That's a harder question, but I think it's a better one. So does the Bible condone revenge? No, it limits it. And then in Jesus, it calls us beyond it entirely. Does Jesus contradict the Old Testament? No, he fulfills it. He takes what the law began, reigning in the worst of human nature, and he shows us the destination it was always pointing towards. Love is a higher way than rights. Grace is a higher way than getting even. That's the Jesus way. Thank you for joining me on Chat PLT. If you've got a question you'd like me to tackle, drop it in the comments. And remember, revenge escalates, justice regulates, Jesus transforms. God bless you.